All right, let's get right to it. We're going to break down one of the most complicated and sensitive issues in the world today, the whole situation with Taiwan. And to do it right, we're going straight to the documents, the laws, and the history that got us here, so we can all understand what's really at stake.
So, what's the big deal? Why is this one island causing so much tension around the globe? Well, it really boils down to this. You have one island, but two governments that both claim it's theirs. On one side, you have the People's Republic of China in Beijing. And on the other, you have the Republic of China in Taipei. They have totally opposite answers to the question, who runs Taiwan? And that disagreement could have huge consequences for all of us.
So, how are we going to make sense of all this? Simple. We're going to walk through it step by step. First, what are these two big claims? Then, what's Beijing's absolute, non-negotiable red line? After that, how does Taiwan actually see itself? Then we'll dig into the history that made this all so messy. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why it matters so much. Right here, right now.
Okay, let's start right at the core of this whole thing. This isn't just some argument over a piece of land. It's a conflict over the very definition of a country. Who gets to claim it? Who gets to rule it? It's about identity, law, and power, and the two sides couldn't be further apart.
All right, so first up, Beijing's side of the story. You have to understand, for the People's Republic of China, or PRC, everything, and I mean everything, comes back to one single idea that they will not bend on.
And that idea is called the One China Principle. It's simple, but it's everything to them. In their eyes, there's only one country called China, period. And Taiwan, it's part of that China. End of story. For Beijing, this is not up for debate.
And look, they're not just saying this. They literally wrote it into their law. This right here is straight from their 2005 Anti-Secession Law. They put it on paper to make it legally official, that from their point of view, Taiwan belongs to them.
So you see where this is going, right? If you follow that law, then any talk about Taiwan being its own independent country, well, Beijing calls that separatism. Even when you hear Taiwan's leaders say something like, hey, we don't report to you, you don't report to us, to Beijing, that's crossing a major line.
And this is the part that makes everyone nervous. Article 8 of that same law says that if their red lines are crossed, the state can use non-peaceful means. Let's be very clear about what that means. That's the legal justification they created for themselves to potentially use military force.
Okay, so that's Beijing's position. It's firm, it's written in law, but now let's hop across the Taiwan Strait and see how things look from Taipei. Because the government there, the Republic of China, or ROC, has a totally different story to tell about who they are. Taiwan's whole argument really stands on two big ideas. First, their own constitution. It says that the power, the sovereignty, belongs to the people who live there. And second, there's just the reality on the ground. As their democratically elected leaders often say, the PRC doesn't govern them, and they don't govern the PRC. For Taiwan, this isn't some old historical debate. It's about today. It's about their democracy and the 23 million people living their own lives.
So you've got to be asking, how can two sides be so completely sure they're right when they're saying opposite things? Well, to get that, we need to jump in a time machine and look at some key documents from way back after World War II. Because what these documents didn't say is actually the key to this whole mess.
Yeah, there are really three key dates you need to know to get this whole legal gray area. 1951, that's when a big peace treaty was signed. 1971, when the UN made a huge call on who gets to represent China. And 2005, when Beijing passed that law we were just talking about. Let's start at the beginning with that treaty from 51. So the San Francisco Peace Treaty. This was a massive deal. A bunch of countries got together with Japan to officially, finally end the war in Asia. And a big part of that was figuring out what to do with all the territory Japan had taken over. And Article 2 of that treaty seems super straightforward. It says, Japan renounces all right, title, and claim to Formosa and the Pescadores. Formosa is just the old name for Taiwan. So, okay, Japan's out. Simple enough, right? Wrong. Here is the giant, massive loophole at the center of this entire dispute. The treaty says Japan gives up Taiwan, but it never, ever says who they're giving it to. Think about that. It just left it hanging in the air. This one little omission created a legal black hole that still exists to this very day. Fast forward 20 years to 1971, and you get another super important and super misunderstood document, UN Resolution 2758. You have to be really clear here about what it did and what it didn't do. What it did was decide who gets the China seat at the UN. It kicked out the ROC government from Taiwan and gave the seat to the PRC from Beijing. But look closely at what it doesn't say. The word Taiwan isn't even in there. It says nothing about Taiwan's political status or who it belongs to. It solved a problem about a chair at the UN, not the problem of the island itself.
Okay, so we've got old laws, confusing treaties. Why should we care about all this today? Because all of this history isn't just history. It's exactly why this is a global flashpoint right now, with huge stakes for everyone.
So it all comes down to this. You have three totally different stories being told at the same time. You've got Beijing's view, Taiwan is our province, and our law says so. You've got Taipei's view, we're our own country, our constitution and our democracy prove it. And then you have the international legal documents, which are basically a big shrug, leaving Taiwan's status technically up in the air.
And this is way bigger than just a political argument. Taiwan makes most of the world's most advanced computer chips, the brains inside your phone, your car, everything. A conflict there would be a disaster for global trade, for technology, and for security all around the world. And that leaves us with one last really tough question. We hear leaders all the time talking about keeping the status quo. But what does that even mean when the two most important players have completely different ideas of what the status quo is? That fundamental disagreement, that's what makes this one of the most dangerous places on the planet.